All right, we're live, and of course the dogs start barking. All right, take it away.
Well, thank you, Nalini Singh, for coming to our Dance with the Devil. I see. This is why you shouldn't do a series where you name every book something with the devil, because you cannot remember which title is which. But I guess I should start by introducing us, probably. So
I think you should start by introducing Miss Singh.
Well, us
not that she needs an introduction.
In the whole,
us, a group of us.
It's a dual celebration.
Yes. So, I do I need to introduce Nalini Singh to everybody?
But you should anyway.
Nalini Singh is the wonderful author of the Side Changeling books and also the Guild Hunter books, and also you have awesome contemporaries. But I can see in your background there you have Storm Echo, which is the latest Side Changeling book, which I got to read early, which made me very happy. I know I was texting you frantically or DMing you frantically while I was reading it because I was so stressed out. It was so intense. And I was really excited that you wanted to come with us. And I am Bree, and that's Donna. We are the two halves of Kit Rocha, if anybody does not know. And we are celebrating our new release today, which is the third book in our Mercenary Librarian series, which is set in the 2080s and has badass ladies who want to build a library trying to save the world. So our series are not super similar, except for that they're both set in the 2080s, which is a complete coincidence. I didn't actually do that on purpose. But I figured it out, actually. I think I was watching some readers on our Discord do some math, and I was like, wait, we actually have these series set within a few years of each other. And I thought it would be super interesting if we came today and talked about how we imagined I guess, for us, it's what the world was going to be in 60 years. But you started this series. When did you start it? 2005?
2005.
Yeah.
2005 is when I sold it. So 2006 is when the first book came out. Yeah.
So you're almost 20 years into this series.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
So,
think about it.
I just mathed. Why did you math? Why did you do that to me? My son was born in 2004. And my other child was born in 2006. So on either side, that. And you just said almost 20 years, and my heart did a thing.
Yep. The babies are getting older. So that's the first thing I want to ask you, because you started in 2005 and you envisioned this futuristic world where, a lot of stuff that you talked about, video chat, was pretty common in your books early on, but it was not as common in 2005. So what did anything change for you when you were thinking about that? Or are there any big things that you feel you got super right, or that you had to go back and sort of be well, that went in a different direction than I expected?
Before I answer that, I was going to say, do you want to check our live stream is going out? Because I can't see any participants. So I'm wondering if people are trying to get in and not getting in.
Marissa, what do you think?
I'll just check if it's streaming on YouTube. Okay. All right, good.
Okay.
I was just we don't want to do this whole thing, and we haven't talked to anybody except each other, which would be fine.
Yes, it would be fun for me, but probably not the best.
Lots of chat happening on YouTube, apparently. So
okay.
We can't see it, guys.
I might sneak over there and spy on them.
I was going to say we're not going to see the questions. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So it's interesting. The reason I chose the 2080s was I wanted it to be out in the future so that it wasn't our present day, but not so far out into the future that we're getting into the realm of true science fiction territory where you've got spaceships and all that kind of stuff. So I really thought, what is far enough ahead that it feels like the future, but it's close enough that it feels real at the same time. So it was that boundary between reality and that sort of futuristic science fiction type world. And so for me, I just sort of settled on, 2079. I thought, and now we're in the books, so we're in 2083. So it just felt natural to me. It felt like things would have changed a lot. And I was also comparing to, say, my parents' generation, what technology they had, to our generation, that massive jump in technology. And then I thought, but would it be such a massive jump in the next generation? Because we have had the biggest jump in technology within our lifetimes, right? Like I was joking with my dad, he's a computer programmer. He's been a computer programmer. He started when he was 18. So like he did an apprenticeship. So he was using like punch cards and stuff. There's a picture of him that I love as this really young programmer in a room that is a computer. Like, it's this entire room. And I said to him the other day, because my mom really loves her smartphone. And I said, oh, Mum, you're probably carrying around more computing power in your pocket than Dad had in that room. Absolutely, and, I asked him and he said, yeah, absolutely. And so it was just, I like to think about stuff like that. And, but yeah, for me, the critical factor was just to make it realistic and believable that this would be the future. And I think the second part of your question was, would I change anything or had some of my thinking changed? Not really, because the world the world is also growing. So within that 4 years, there are technological changes within the world that make sense in terms of the scientists we know in the world and the people who are developing technology in the world. So I feel for that world, it's a natural progression. Yeah. How about you guys? I'll turn the question around on you. Like, why the 2080s?
That's super interesting. Because like you were talking about wanting to have it near future, but not so near that, you were kind of butting up against like present day. And we kind of had to like split the difference, because we have, like a historical event in the series, like the flares, the solar flares that took out all of the or most of the infrastructure. And we wanted that event to happen, be like a near future event, but not like immediately after now. Like we didn't want to have a situation where we were like working on books in this universe still, and like the flares would have already happened from when we're like sitting there, like, talking about the books. So we were like, okay, what's close enough where it could feel like, a very like real sort of, imminent crisis point. But then we also had to jump ahead some more, because we were, going for, okay, now how many decades do we want to have after this, precipitating event, so that people have sort of rebuilt their microcosmic versions of society. So, we were kind of like, we kind of like we're puddle jumping there,
Yeah, we built, we started this series, like we started this world in 2012 when we did our Beyond series. So from there we were like, let's go 30 years from here into 2042, and like, so we're going to progress 30 years of technology, and then we're going to have this sort of apocalyptic event, and different communities are going to either continue to advance or some are going to backslide. When we wrote the Beyond series, I thought it was funny because a lot of people actually called it a contemporary series, because we sort of had this like futuristic stuff from the 2040s canceled out by the backslide of the apocalypse. And so they're like, well, it's modern tech. But, there were little things in there, like we have magical healing medical gel. We did a lot of like small things that were like technological advances. But in this series, the big corporation stepped in and kind of prevented that backslide. They, if anything, the lack of oversight and regulations resulted in like accelerated progression.
Set, like, since it's set in Atlanta, and that's like such a, like technological and medical like hub of industry, then it just made sense that it wasn't going to be the same as like, sort of middle of the desert Nevada. So it's going to be a little different.
No, I was going to say, I think in this book in particular, without being spoilery, the part of it you see towards the second half of the book, you definitely see that more advanced technology, which was really interesting. It was an interesting contrast to what you see in the earlier books and as much. And also in this Dance with the Devil, at the start of it, where they're in where they live, basically their living situation, and then what is actually available in this world, which I thought was really interesting. And it's obviously part of your world building, that contrast, right? But it must have been really cool actually to make up some of that stuff. Like, do you guys have fun with it?
Some of it was fun.
Yeah.
And some of it was just terrifying.
Like, so often we'll do some, like, I wonder if this is realistic, especially when we start looking into the medical, like bioengineering stuff. We'll go, I wonder if something like this is realistic. And we start searching, and there are like 500 companies with really scary, evil names already doing stuff in that area. And you're like, oh no, no, the billionaires are crazy wild here. We gotta watch out for them.
There is such interesting technology out there. Like someone tagged me in like an article, I think it was in a science, this was not an evil type thing. This was actually like adaptive technology, but basically connecting brains. And they said, look, the sign is beginning already. And I thought that, it's like, that's really cool. How you can see the beginnings of all this really interesting stuff is out there. And I don't know about you, but I know that I absorb all this information, and then I think it goes into my subconscious, and then I just extrapolate. Extrapolate 30 years in the future, 50 years in the future. Where would we be from this point on? And it's actually really, really, like, I enjoy doing it, even on the dark side.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes the dark side stuff, I mean, I think I called it today horrified fascination.
Yeah,
because, people are creative in wonderful and terrible ways.
We do get a lot of people who stumble across articles that are basically like the 2-3 years down the road from the initial stuff that we were researching. They're like, hey, this thing that's in your series, like someone's doing it, and we're like, well, yeah, like, because we knew that was happening, because that's why we put it in there. There's like just tons of stuff in the series that people think we made it up, but we didn't make it up. Like it's a thing. It's real. It's like, it's just that we have had to, move forward from where the thinking and the efforts and the research are currently, because, it's in the future. So it's interesting to watch people think that somehow like we are just like precognitive, or that we just decided that, they've decided we're psychic and we just know something that's like we're not that. No.
You should just accept that you're psychic. Just accept it.
That would be no. I would my kids would get on the internet and call me out. Be like, she read this in a journal. Okay.
Yeah, one of my favorite ones is that, like, with Deal with the Devil, we were having problems. There was something that, like, our editor wanted us to fix, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. And then on Twitter, somebody retweeted something about people in, somebody had encoded malware in DNA. And I was like, oh, here we go. Here's my solution. Thank you, Twitter. Yeah, that's terrifying, but useful.
It's terrifying, but for writers, it's such useful material, all those little bits and pieces of information that come in, and you think, ooh, how can I use this? And like you said, in a slightly terrifying way. It's already out there. But I think I saw a question go past that Marissa reposted, I think, asking about what it's like writing with two authors, which I was actually curious about as well. I was going to ask you, does one of you write the fight scenes, for example, and the other one edits, or do you literally do it? Yeah, like, tell me your process.
So we are sort of funny. I think it's because we come from a gaming background. We always did this thing where we split up our characters. And so, like, one person is kind of in charge of, every character has one person who's in charge of them, and we get final say on their backstory, on all of their dialogue, on everything they do. So we literally get in a Word document, and sometimes we'll just like start typing together. Like she'll type, and then we have a signal, which is somebody puts an asterisk when they don't have anything else to say. And so we will just go back and forth. And sometimes like you got to write a chapter by yourself because all of your characters are in it. But sometimes we will go back and forth a couple lines at a time. And this like literally, because like, I don't think I could write Donna's characters. We have very different voices and we think differently. And like, sometimes her characters surprise me. They do things that I would never do, which can be like amazing, because I think that like when we have conflicts, they spring from this place where they have two people who very seriously believe that they are right. And then sometimes that gets us mad at each other because we're both like on the side of one of these people.
It's like
very
the
much
most combative round robin.
Yeah. But you know, sometimes it can go sideways because we you know, as a writer, you do need scenes to be coherent and make sense. And if like, you know, we start going off in some weird direction, we have to be like, okay, no, this is going to drive the book off a cliff.
So do you like are you one of those writers who finishes a page and then moves on to the next, or are you like me where it's like I dump it all on the page and then I go back and re-edit it?
We used to be a lot more sequential. I think that we wrote pretty much in order, and by the time we got to the end, it was, I mean, I'm not going to say it was a clean draft, but it was close to the correct story. But the pandemic kind of messed us up. I mean, I think a lot of people had different reactions, and we both got COVID early on, like in the first few months. And so we were sick and we were trying to write that second book, and we just started writing whatever scene we could think of, whoever could come put words on the page. And I always was scared of doing that. And it actually was kind of amazing. So now I'm like, okay, maybe I'm going to try this thing where we just vomit, not to be weird, like just throw everything out of our brains. And then, you know, it always
comes a point where you have to like lasso it into shape.
Yeah.
But you know, like I usually can do that pretty well, like have it all in my head and be like, okay, you know, like maybe this order. And then it's like I'm kind of like I'm kind of like a cat with like a, you know, finding like a dead chipmunk or something in the yard. It's like I'll bring it to Bree and I'll be like, how does this look? You know, like I think that this is, you know, like a good, like, what do you think? And she'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, that works. Or like, I don't know, I kind of wanted to do something, you know, a little different with the order here, or add something in, or, you know, so it is one of those things where we have to sort of like divide and conquer a little bit.
Donna is a lot better at seeing big pictures than I am. She can sort of hold the whole book in her head and like get a sense of pacing in a way I'm really bad at. So a lot of the times when we get towards the end, she will literally get a bunch of note cards out and like just make a list of all the stuff we still have left to do, and like start seeing how they fit together in scenes. And then she'll show it to me and I'll be like, okay, that seems like it's
my dead
work.
chipmunk. Yeah.
That's her dead. He called it a dead chipmunk, and I'm like, Donna, it's a masterful like note card outline, beautiful thing. I don't know.
Look, the cat thinks that dead chipmunk is masterful too. Okay. Like,
well,
I'm gonna stop talking about dead animals now.
It's a lot nicer than she's making it sound.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just it's like, I mean, obviously collaborative, but I don't feel like collaborative really like covers it. Because I think that when people are sort of, you know, like just kind of trying to envision how Bree and I like make books, that they kind of have this idea that, you know, we're both just sort of kind of industriously working individually, but then somehow we make it like fit together. But it's just this constant, like, you know, from the beginning of the, you know, idea, we actually, the whole thing with like getting ideas from, you know, articles from the news, from, you know, science journals, that goes all the way back to the beginning of this universe, because we absolutely like conceived of this universe in the summer of like 2012, right after we had like the entire Earth had this very near miss from this huge coronal mass ejection.
Yeah, I
And
remember that.
we were, yeah, within like a few hours or like 10 hours of it actually just like smacking us full force. And so at that time, they were basically like, okay, well, we're going to have to do a study of this and try to determine how bad it would have been exactly. Like now that we have all the measurements, we're going to have to see how bad it would have been if this had like slapped us in the face. So we're going to do that. In the meantime, like Bree and I were sitting over here going, I think that's our next apocalypse. I like that one. Like I think we should do something with that. And so we were already kind of like hip deep in the universe by the time that report came out. But I don't even think like the actual numbers, the actual like estimated damages, especially in the US, it was worse than what we had imagined. It was even worse because plenty of other places, Europe, other countries, other continents, they have a lot of infrastructure redundancies and protections that they've put in place so that their power grids would not get fried if something like this were to happen. We don't have that here in the US. Like we have power grids that have been privatized and squeezed a profit to the point where they're failing under normal circumstances. So one thing that we had right was that the US would be absolutely boned. Abso-freaking-lutely boned. But even we had no idea exactly how bad it would be. But even that little thing, it was like, what do you think about this one? Yeah. I think that this would be a good one. And from there, it was just like back and forth, building it up. It's like, if we're each like laying out playing cards in the stack, and sometimes I'll lay out 4 or 5. Sometimes I'll lay out 1. Sometimes I'll lay out a couple and Brie will pick them up and be like, no, I don't think so. I'm usually the one picking up cards and going, no, I don't think so. But, and eventually it builds a stack. But it's always both of us like throwing stuff out there, taking stuff away, So we don't write nice, tidy chapters and then send them to someone, send them to the other person and go have a glass of wine. We're, always in there doing the thing at the exact same time. Which is like why it's so funny when people are like, it must be nice to like, be able to have the workload of making a book. And I'm like, oh, honey.
We somehow managed to make co-writing as hard as writing on your own. Or maybe even harder.
I'm just fascinated by it. Because I'm the absolute opposite. I'm a control freak.
Oh no, we're control freaks.
We both are because like it just comes into play with our characters. Yeah. We will just like get in fights about that. So it is a strange process. Like it's so normal to us now, but then when we have to describe it to someone, they're like, that sounds really, really, really impossible. And it is, it's like I have to write with like, it's like writing with your editor staring over your shoulder going, no. And like you have to get used to that.
I mean,
it's a whole different skill. I admire you both for being able to do it.
Thank you.
I admire you for being able to do it by yourself.
Like, how do you finish it? Here's my question. How do you finish a book if you're not disappointing your best friend if you don't get it done?
Yeah.
I know a book is done when I'm just staring at a question mark or like a comma and be like, oh, I should move this. And I'm like, why? Why do you need to move this? Just because you have to do something to this page. It's done. Yeah, no, and I Cindy has been my editor since the very first book in the Side Changing series. So she obviously knows the series extremely well. And so she is basically the first reader in terms of feedback. And like her revision notes are always like on point. I've once famously turned in a book with a scene that was very difficult to write, so I just didn't write it. And
we did that a couple times in this one. One of the action scenes was a bullet point list of cool things that was going to happen.
I saw it in your acknowledgements. I saw it.
And one just had brackets and said, insert cool fight scene here.
Yeah, it's and I think when you've got a good editor and you've got someone who just gets it, it's like there's something missing here. And it's because I literally left nothing there. It was like, this book is done. And she's like, no, it's not. You just didn't write the scene. I was like, oh, are you gonna make me? And then I cried because it was a really traumatic scene in the series. And then I wrote it. But yeah, I think knowing when a book is done is usually, I think, the hardest part. But at the same time, I do feel like I have because I know it's going to come back from my editor, I feel like that gives me a little bit of distance so I can see it more clearly when it does come back and I'm working on revisions and edits. And somehow through the entire process, we end up with the finished book. So what I turn in is I have to be happy with it. So like I've fully rewritten books. I've started from scratch after writing 80,000 words. So I think part of that is just doing it for so long. Like I know that this is not what I want my readers to read. And sometimes I just have to get it out. All that stuff. And then I know, oh, it's not that good. And so I start again.
That still is the hardest for me when I look at something and I'm like, I've worked so hard for these 3,000 words. Are you going to tell me that they are all garbage? And like, sometimes they're all garbage.
Sometimes they're garbage, yeah.
And actually, like, I feel like the harder I have to work for them sometimes is like the garbage words are the ones I worked the hardest for because it wasn't working. And some part of me knew it wasn't working, but I was like, I'm going to make this work. And
it's true. And I think how I sort of tricked myself is I never delete things. I just save it in a different version. So I might come back to it and never come back to it, but I like to know it's there. Psychologically, that helps me move on because it's like those words are still there.
Yeah, there's absolutely that's I think what people should do. I mean, like if it sucks, okay, sure, just put it somewhere else. Don't delete it because there's something about deleting it, just making it go away, that's like a little bit demoralizing. But if you can just put it somewhere else, it's like,
yes,
something definitely kind of changed for me in like, I don't think of things like that as being wasted anymore. Even if I never use them for anything else, they served a purpose.
You learned something.
Yeah, even if all I learned was that I had started this story in the wrong place, or that, this person needs to have an entirely different background than the one I was planning on giving them. I mean, like you learn something even from like the crap, So
it's totally true. I agree with that. I feel like I write my way into stories. And so for me, that's just part of the process, writing those words. But the other thing I was going to say, the reason you should also not delete is the writers are very notoriously bad at judging our own writing in the moment. And so sometimes you go back and you read it 2 weeks later and you go, this is really good. What was I thinking? It's like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't actually delete it because, and I think that's something that doesn't get said enough. I think people get into making decisions in the moment that can like you could lose something really, really good.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm a big fan of like save it and actually do give yourself that distance if you are struggling with something and say, hey, let me take another look at this and decide, is it actually what I thought it was, or is it actually good?
There's a thing that happens when Bree and I are writing sometimes. Like she says that sometimes it feels like your editor is like sitting there like watching you write, but sometimes I am actually sitting there watching her write. Not that I'm your editor, but I get it. But sometimes I am sitting there watching it. And there have been a couple of times where I've watched just this paragraph take shape and I'm like, that's the perfect paragraph. And then I watch it disappear. And I'm like, oh, where did it go? And then she writes something else completely. And I'm like, that was the perfect paragraph. But I don't get to decide that because now it's gone.
Yeah.
So that is the thing. It's a magic trick. Sometimes I yell, stop. Just literally
work.
get in the manuscript after that and go, stop.
Yeah, sometimes she does just start typing stop and like yelling at me below where I'm typing.
Stop.
Oh
Because we're
man.
never,
So it is.
because we're never
And, like, so-
actually
okay,
like,
I just-
communicating. Like we're
I
never.
see that someone asked this. Yeah, we're not actually like we're never in the same room or anything. And I'm gonna like answer this question because it's kind of related. We've done some pretty explicit sex scenes. You just have a few drinks and totally get a giggle fest on. Okay, so we can't write when we're in the same room. We won't do anything. We'll just talk. And like the writing the sex scenes, like I always feel like I'm spoiling someone's like imagination, but it is like the least sexy thing that you can imagine when you're trying to coordinate where like hands are with another person while you're trying to like make a scene make sense. It is like constructing a Lego set with your eyes closed or something. So I don't know how it works. Like, you know, I do sometimes scream, I don't want to type this. It's too dirty. But like, I mean, I did that a couple times because I don't know, Rafe and Danny, man.
Sometimes there's a little bit of alcohol involved. I'll just go ahead and say it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, okay, yeah, I had a drink and now I can do the thing. I can write the thing and get the words out. So sometimes there's a little bit of alcohol involved. Can't be a lot of alcohol involved, and it can't always be involved because then we would have problems. And that's not a good way to have to exist when you're writing a sexy series or sexy scenes. But no, yeah, I could not write like a sexy scene if Bree was sitting there staring at me. No, I would be like, go away. You can't be here while I'm trying to do this thing. That's
Sometimes
No.
when I am trying to write something sexy in our manuscript, I will tell her she has to close it. Like, because I can tell if she's got it open because of Google Docs. I'll be like, you have to close it and go away. You can't watch me try to do this. I have performance anxiety.
Yeah, I have to come back later.
So
Oh man, these are all things I never thought about, you know, like I never thought about that particular, yeah, that would be super awkward. Like, yeah.
but somehow I guess it works. So, you know,
I'm sorry to all the dreams we've dashed today, but it is like super awkward and really difficult to do.
Okay,
And
but since we brought up sex, what superpower sex thing are we getting next? Because let me tell you, psi power sex
I did
stuff.
not know where that was going to go, but I'm glad that that's where it went. Okay.
No, it's one of my favorite things since we're talking about sexy scenes now about your books is like, I love how you manage to make like the different psychic powers like be such a part of their characters and also like part of the intimacy and stuff. And like, I mean, I think Basic is like my favorite, you know, you gotta teleport during sex if you're not doing it. If you're not distracted enough to end up in the desert a few times, I mean, you're not doing it right? So
I think honestly so far the teleporters have been the most fun just because they do crazy stuff like that. It's very physical and so it's more visible, and I have a lot of fun with earthquakes as well with a certain person,
I love
certain couples.
earthquakes.
So they tend to sneak into a few books. I just the one I'm working on now, there might be an earthquake in there. This area has suddenly become geologically very active. I don't know why. And I like doing things like that where it's like a through thread for readers who, you know, have followed the series for a long time and they pick up on those little things. Whereas for a newer reader, it's not, they're not going to not understand it. It still makes sense in the context of the story. But if they do become familiar with the series, then they get another level of meaning into it. So that's kind of fun to do. In terms of what's coming up, there's always interesting things coming up, sex scenes included. And so this next one is actually a changeling. So
ooh.
I'll just spoiler it now because I haven't actually mentioned it anywhere. We're going back to the bears. So so there will be shenanigans, okay?
Shenanigans.
Shenanigans.
Okay,
really
my
fun.
follow-up question is, are you in my Discord and what's your name there?
No, I'm not.
Trying to trap you.
No, I'm not. I sometimes is like, should I just join it under a fake name and just see what everyone's saying? And I was like, no, it would drive you insane. Just stop. So when I was I was a young writer when I started, and so I used to read all the reviews and everything. And after a while, I started going a little bit like, it's too many voices in the head.
Yeah.
And then I just was like, okay, like back off. And even when it's really nice things people are saying, it's still other people's thoughts,
Sometimes that is worse to me, because
Yeah,
it's like
I
if
don't want to
somebody
disappoint people.
if somebody has negative things to say, I feel like I can brush that off more easily than I can deal with the pressure of, like the weight of people's expectations. It's like, I don't look at reviews anymore at all, ever, under any circumstances. It's a bad idea. And it's not even that, like I have a problem with reviews, even bad ones. I'm like, we've sold lots of books off of some bad reviews before, because as long as they are detailed reviews, somebody could look at that and be like, this thing they hated is exactly what I love, and then they
Hunger Games, but corn.
So, but it's not for me. That the reviews, that information is not for me, and I don't need it. It's not.
I think
it's not going to help anyone.
That's what I was gonna say. I think I love readers' reviews, so like I love it because it helps other readers find books.
Yeah.
And when I'm a reader looking for a book, of course I go looking for reviews for a book that I want to try out. I want to check. Usually I'm kind of a blind buyer of books. Like if I'll see something, I'll be like, oh, I'll just check it out. But if there's something that gives me like a pause, like, hello, is this, one of those romances where it's a whole new thing? And I'm like, oh, have you not got a happy ending in this book? Is this what you're telling me?
Are we missing that?
I'm looking for reviews, because I just need to know. So yeah, as a reader, I really like reviews, and as an author, I love reviews for the landscape they create for readers to find information. But as an author, I think, it's just that
too much noise.
It's too much noise. And I learned this very early on in my career. I remember getting these 2 emails, and they were on the same thing. They were about the exact same thing. And the first one said, I hate this. And the second one said, I love this. And I was like, oh, okay. So I think it was a good lesson to learn, which is that I can only rely on my voice, because that's what brought a reader into the series. And so if I try and start trying to sort of please people, that's when you start losing track of things, and it starts fraying. The fabric starts fraying. And so for better or worse, I'll own my decisions. It's me. I made the call. So and I think that's the way it has to be.
Bree actually had a screen cap at one point. I think she may still have it, of 2 reviews that have been posted on Amazon. Not of this series or anything. It was like one of our early series. It was like a paranormal romance series. The first in the Southern Arcana series. And there were these 2 back-to-back reviews. And one review said that they slogged through the whole damn book, and there was like one measly sex scene or whatever they said. And the next review, literally the very one beneath it, said that the book was nothing but sex. So it's like
2 1-star reviews, and one was like, passable paranormal fantasy fails as urban fantasy, and the next one was boring romance fails as erotica. And I was like, okay, well, it's not urban fantasy or erotica. So I understand why you were both very disappointed.
But what are you gonna do?
Yeah, can't. But I will say the reason I blurted that out is because bears, and they're going to be so happy. I think that they're probably all hyperventilating somewhere now because you have said bears.
They are, yeah.
That's right, bears. Hey, Bree, I saw a question go by for me, but I can't see it on my screen. Can you see it on yours?
Yeah. Okay. And this is a question. I think it's a fun one. How does the Psy Changeling world history differ from ours? Were there changeling dinosaurs?
Well, so it's an alternate reality. So it wasn't as if was our world at some point in time and then it changed into this world. It's always been this world. So the entire history of the world is, beginning to end. So how I see it is there was a point in time where the Psi, the changelings, and the humans were actually one. They were one being, and there was a genetic split at some point in our deep historical past, and we continued on from there. So there were no changeling dinosaurs, because that's not, that's not part of the evolutionary tree there. But they all came from the same being, whatever that being was, the protoplasm in the beginning. And so that's why I always say there are three races, not three species, because they're not three different species. They can procreate together, and they interact together. Like intellectually, they're all very similar. And so they are just three different offshoots of one species. And so yeah, it's fun thinking back to the history, and every so often I'll drop a little bit in there. And one time I tried to write a historical novel, because I like historical novels. I'm a terrible historical novel writer, is what I learned through this experience. I still have that novella, and I set it in the time of the territorial wars, because that's actually a part of the history that has been noted in the books, like more so than other parts of the history. And I thought, that would be actually interesting to go more in depth on. And I mean, it's a good novella, but it's not quite right. So I keep fiddling with it here and there. So one day,
I'll take a look at it for you.
Very generous.
Just, I am a great editor. That's what Bree said.
So, it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I want my Adina Mercant, stabby poetress novella, the murder poet. She's my girl. I love she's just every epigraph with her. I'm like, oh my God, she's back and she's mad.
I'm gonna ask, did you write Danny?
No, that was Donna. Donna wrote
me.
I thought Danny and Adina would probably be friends,
Yeah, definitely. That's a cross.
Friends.
See a problem,
world.
stab a problem. That right there is
That's right.
That's well, they both got that on t-shirts.
So yes.
I do have a question that kind of riffs off something you were talking about before, which is like how the US was impacted by the flare, right? So we see this in your books. Do you have any intention of moving outside the US to in the books, like setting the books anywhere else, or are you sticking to the Atlanta area and stuff like that?
I've had some ideas, but
well, I will say, the US is also, in the books, what was the US has also contracted. And so there was some times that I wanted to go and do Canada, because part of the history of this world is that a lot of the northern territory of the United States was just well, can we come up and hang with you guys?
And same thing along the southern border. There were a lot
Mexico and Canada took some of these territories, and there are times that I've wanted to do that. We have thought about what is going on in other places, and I feel like a lot of them are probably in slightly better shape. But I don't know if we've got a plan yet, though. No. I am really interested in I loved that we got to go from this sort of, in the Beyond series, we got to write this sort of desert place that had a lot of religious stuff and a lot of, sparse, very isolated. And then Atlanta, we got to write a super futuristic city, and we have some communes and mountains. We have lots of different other places that we had imagined. So sometimes I think, the communes might be sort of fun to the mountain communes, the people who just were no, we're going to go hang out and be cool. And
I would love to do a little European village.
Yeah.
That's what I would love to do. But I don't know, it would kind of be like starting from scratch, because it's we would have the same, basic event there, but it, didn't play out the same. And so what would, happen? Would say Paris, you have the fact that they could potentially be far less impacted technologically by the flares, but that's not really the only factor, is it? Like, I could absolutely see like a, you know, a European city actually having essentially developing a cultural and a political viewpoint where it's basically like, okay, maybe we should just pull back from this, you know, technological advancement because it's obviously unreliable, and doing something where they basically, it becomes, you know, sort of almost like a really retro throwback to, you know, gaslight almost, you know. So it's like, I don't know, like, you could do so many things.
You could
Take it in so many directions. And that's really what I would like to do. Like, my idea is that I would want to go to Europe. I would want to go to a whole other like continent, take your pick. You know, there's so many things to think about, so many places. There have got to be places in the world that were completely unaffected, because that's just how, you know,
Globes
the science would work. Yeah, that's just how globes work, you know. Like, there are places that are not, you know, of course, what's the deal with those places? Like, why are they not traveling to the places that were hardest hit and, you know, taking over and rebuilding? And maybe they are in some places, you know. So there's just so many things, and it's just so many directions. And I feel like there's almost a it almost like a squirrel on the road. I don't know which direction to go, you know.
I always call them squirrels as well.
It's like,
ideas, you know.
Yeah,
because you start with one thing and then you're like, yeah, but what about the transport links? Maybe the international transport links no longer exist, right? Like maybe
I mean, when you mess up satellites, you have a lot of cascading problems from that.
Right.
Yeah. So and I love thinking about stuff like that, and I think that's why we write the kind of books we do, because we do take something and we go, okay, but then what if? You know, what if?
Yeah.
And then what happens from that what if? And it's fun. Oh, that's interesting. Well, I mean, it could be a spin-off, you know, you could eventually do a spin-off in Europe.
I would totally do a little, like, almost like a Victorian type, like, city or village.
That's how you get to write the historical without actually writing a historical.
Yeah.
We like to cheat.
Yeah, cheating. I would love, you know, that reminds me of something. Okay. Romance. Like, both of these worlds have challenges. Ours much more than, you know, especially like the side changeling stuff. There's stuff, but I would not call it like it's not dystopian. Historical romances, like, they'll sit there and they ask questions oftentimes about, like, they tend to question the happily ever afters that, like, oppressed or marginalized people get. Like, Black characters or characters of color, or like queer or trans characters, they'll sit there and they'll be like, I can't buy into this happily ever after, because who could have a happily ever after in those circumstances, like when their lives are like so terrible or this or that. And I'm kind of like, you should be asking that about our books. Like, why are you not asking that about the dystopians? Because if you want to talk about, like, and I feel like the answer is the same either way. Not that I think that argument is ever really made in good faith, but it's because it's what people do, you know, like, they survive, they carry on, you know, like they persevere. And so to me, it's like, I would like to do essentially like something that feels like a historical, where, you know, you can explore how people are dealing with the same event, like, in different ways. And it's all about, like, carrying on, you know, because
I think it's hope. Romance is, you know, always been about hope. That's what I think a lot of people, particularly people who denigrate romance, don't understand. We read for the hope, for the journey that we go on. It's not that everyone focuses on the ending, but we're reading for the journey to the ending, and it's a journey of hope. You know, we're having hope as readers when we pick up a book that the author is going to make this, you know, whatever terrible things happened, you know, it's make it worthwhile at the end. But the other thing I was going to say, that's why I really loved, have you read Mel June Brooks' Iron Sea series?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you know, she's got that sort of Victorian steampunk, you know, technology, and it's just such a cool like balance. So yeah, I love that kind of stuff. I love the meshing of the historical with the technological, and two other authors that do this really well actually are writing here, Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. If you haven't read their Liaden books, you must.
Oh, I
it's
need
like
to.
Regency's in space, okay? That's how I sell it. You know, it's like this society that's got manners and things mean, you know, a bow at a certain level means I'm going to kill your entire house, compared to, oh, this is a very pull-out bow. I love it. It's one of my favorite series, but it's doing that thing where it's taking the old and the new and meshing it, and I think that's so fun. And when it's done really well, it's just fascinating to read. And so if you go that way, I will be lining up to read it.
Yeah, that's kind of my dream. But
I
then
will
again,
say we may have a fantasy project that has a little bit of feel of that in the works.
Yeah.
Won't say anything else yet, but something
You heard it
a
here
little,
first.
little something in the works. So, but you know, when Donna brought that up, I just thought like this side changeling, especially the Trinity books, they are happy endings with like almost like, well, not certain, but like what feels like to these characters inevitable doom hanging over their heads. I mean, they have like the world arc is scary for them. They are going through something where the system that keeps them alive could be collapsing. And yet I love that you managed to make every single happy ending feel like, you know, I have hope for these people and I believe that whatever comes. I think I described romance to somebody the other day as you come into the book and they're facing an uncertain world on their own, and they leave the book facing the uncertain world together. And I think that you are like really good at that.
Oh, thank you. I think that's a brilliant way to put it. I think we have characters who are choosing love and choosing hope at the end. That's what you want. They're choosing to see the possibility of a brighter future. And it's the same with your books, you know, that they're in this very dystopian world, and yet they're building, you know, they're not destroyers, except of the evil, of course, but they're choosing to build, hopeful that the building will stand, you know, to use an analogy. It's it's like we're going to walk into this future together, and we'll take it as it comes, and we have faith that we're going to figure it out. And I think that's at the core of a lot of romance, but particularly I think in speculative fiction, because of the worlds we often build and the overarching plot lines we have, where there is something world destroying, or in your case it's happened, you know, the world has been destroyed basically, and it's that rebuild, like, can you rebuild with all these forces sort of acting against you? So I think hope is like even more important, and it's an even more critical part of the overall structure of the books.
Well, I'm going to hope for bears.
You don't have to hope for bears.
I know, but I'm still excited.
You just have to look forward to bears.
Look forward to bears.
That's right. Yeah.
So there is one question that we missed. How frustrating are the edits when you feel you've done your best? I'm going to be honest. I don't think we have ever gotten an edit level. Like usually when an editor says this something is wrong with the scene, it's a scene that we knew something was wrong with, and we turned it in like maybe they won't notice, maybe we're wrong. Like most of the time, I mean, there are times when I tell my editor, no, that's not changing. But most of the time, like it's that they caught me feeling for me, because you know there's often that something wasn't quite right. But like you said, you can't always judge yourself. I mean, there have also been scenes where I felt, oh, they're going to catch me on this one, and the editor loves it. So
I don't get frustrated about edits.
Yeah,
like it has no, how I feel I've done has no bearing on, you know, I mean, like, because there's stuff that's the whole point of edits, right? Is to take it outside of yourself.
Yeah.
So it's like, sometimes there are things, sometimes you're too close to it. Oftentimes you're too close to it. That's why you need a third party. You need somebody else to look at it. And sometimes, it's like Bree says, there's stuff that you hated that they think is fine, that doesn't ping for them at all, or they even think it's great. And there's stuff that you love that they're like, hey, look, come on now. Like, this is, you love it. I know you love it. I respect that you love it, but it's got to go because it's dragging the story down, or it's, it's got no place here. Just because you love it doesn't mean it should be there. Right. So, no, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't turn anything in unless I feel I've done my best. And my best is situational. Like, sometimes I have polished it to the best of my ability. Other times I was doing well.
Insert cool
to get it
fight
finished.
here.
Yeah. Like, it sometimes, but it's always my best. It's always my best at the moment. It's not always the best that I can do, but it's the best I can do then. And, sometimes that means less work going forward. Sometimes it means more work going forward, but it's impossible to tell because, I have turned in things that I was like, oh, there's going to be so much to clean up. It's an absolute freaking mess. It's going to be horrible. And it was fine. So, like, it's, it's, the two are completely divorced. Like, how I feel that if I've done my best or not, and the frustration at the end, it's completely divorced. I don't get really frustrated until like copy edits. And it hasn't happened on any of these books, but sometimes you get a copy editor who wants to like change things like dialogue that's incorrect. And I'm like, it's incorrect for a reason. I know how to speak, but it's that way for a reason. And it needs to stay that way because that is what the character would say. Just, little things get frustrating. But overall, I actually really enjoy the edit process. It's not fun. It's never fun for someone to sit there and be like, this is wrong. You did a wrong thing. You did not get this right. That's not fun. But I enjoy the editing process because it's, part of how I think.
I think I'm with you on that. Like, it's not emotional. And I think from the outside, you might think it's very emotional to have it. But, it's very collaborative when you work with a good editor, because they'll say, hey, this is what I saw. And this is what I think is missing, or I think, this is, like you said, maybe this is like a little bit too long, you need to tighten it up and stuff. And I always take that all on board. And I think of it as making things better, like adding another layer of texture. And of course, there are some things we might not agree on. And then it's just a discussion. It's like you said, you can say no and say, hey, I want to keep this because of da 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 da. And so it is very sort of, it's not in any way a fight, it's just part of the process. And I actually really enjoy it as well. I love having that external eye on it, and someone who knows the books really well, someone who knows my writing really well. And I often find I will write very fast when I'm revising because the whole book is in my head, the characters are in my head, and then when I see their point of view and I see, oh yeah, she's right, this is missing, I can fit it into the flow. Like, I can see where it's missing, and then it's just,
you can see the shape of the puzzle piece, and you can just kind of slot it in there.
The puzzle piece in. So yeah, I actually really enjoy it. And and this is not actually about the editors, this is about me. I get frustrated with myself when you get to the first pass pages or the proof where it's been typeset for printing, so that's very difficult to change things, and you notice something that's like a continuity error. And I'm like, really? I've read this book 25 million times by now, and not only other people have read this book, at least 10 other people probably by that point have read this book, and nobody has. And I think sometimes when something does sneak through, I want to say, but we tried so hard. Tried so hard. There was one book that I remember, and it was hilarious. I was actually laughing because I think it was Bonds of Justice. Yeah, it was like a murder mystery in that book. And they were talking about the dead body before they found the dead body. And it was like, so that's like a major error, right? And like, it was there, and I was like, how is it that I have not seen this then? And I'm really like, I do timelines, you know, like everything's like my writing process might be just sort of go with the flow, but when I check everything, there's timelines, and I'm checking and making sure, you know, and things are, yeah, no, this dead body appeared before the person was murdered. So
it's so
human.
hard though when you have the story in your head, you see what you expect to be there.
Yeah.
And it is just, I could just so see how it happens. But
yeah, so
we actually,
you're gonna laugh.
We had a thing in the second book, Mercenary Librarians, and the first Mercenary Librarians book. I'm going to admit it in here that one of the epigraphs it was supposed to be that Richter had been watching Gray, like he had been undergoing evaluations, and I said how long it had been, for like 15 years or something. And then when we were getting ready for book 2, Donna did the math, and Donna was like, that was when he was like 12. He wasn't a protectorate soldier, so why would he have been under observation for that? And that is why his backstory became that he was being watched by this guy. Like, so we literally just like retconned the whole thing because I put a silly date in there.
It wasn't,
like,
I'll go ahead and say this though. It wasn't actually a retcon.
Well,
like, I just sort of took it and I used it because I will tell you guys the complete and honest to God truth. I know we've talked a lot about how we like, you know, develop these characters and everything. Gray was an absolute blank to me when we were starting book 2. Like, he didn't have a backstory. Like, I knew that he was an orphan and that was it. Like, it.
He was not talkative.
he wasn't talkative on the page or in my head. So I had to like do his entire backstory. So it wasn't like it countermanded some sort of, you know, backstory he already had and I had to change it. I was just sort of like, don't sweat it. I'll just use it, you know?
Yeah, sometimes you go back and find something and you're like, well, I didn't mean for that to be this, but now it means this.
Yeah,
so
that was an absolute mistake. But you know what? We're just going to move forward. And we're going to, you know.
And I mean, you used it, like you're saying he didn't have a backstory, but he did. His backstory was that 15 years ago he was being watched, you know?
Yes,
that's
backstory
the
pregame.
reader knows, you know?
I gave him with a typo and a bad math.
That's right. That is. And I mean, and you held to that. For me, that's actually the key. Do you maintain the continuity? A true retcon would have been to go back and either change the book so that that 15 years was no longer 15, or just ignoring it and hoping readers will just never notice, which they'll notice. So you just accepted it, that this is what you put into your world, and you ran with it. And I think some really interesting world building and writing comes out of realizing that you painted yourself in a corner in a book because you never thought it was going to come up again, and suddenly it does, and you have to figure out how to fix it when you've made it so it's not fixable. And I think I do some of my most creative problem solving with that, because it's about finding solutions that make logical sense, and without overwriting what went before, you know. It's building on the foundation. So I actually find that kind of stuff really, really exciting as a writer to do.
It's fun because it's, you know, it's a challenge.
Yeah, it is so fun when you can go back and find something that you like a present you left for yourself in the past.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I put that there. I didn't remember doing it, but now I can use it. It's great.
You can use it, and it's and I think particularly, so this series is only 3 books so far, but you've got longer series, so you'll know what I mean when I say that when you write a long series, sometimes your subconscious has dropped things in there, and mine definitely does. And then you're like doing, you know, I reread my books to make sure I'm refreshed in the world and that I am really present in what's happening. And I'll be like, hey, this is really cool. I should use that. And then suddenly, you know, got this whole sort of, and it's in there because some part of my brain was already making those connections that, you know,
Yeah.
5 years down the track, you're going to need this little piece of thing that I put in there. And sometimes it's conscious. I have consciously done this with Caleb's book, which in book 2, I seeded something and then it came to fruition in book 12. But a lot of the times it's subconscious. It's just trusting your gut and leaving things in there. And and that's why it's a creative act, right? Writing is not math. It's like painting with words. So we just have to go with our instincts a lot of the time.
Instinct.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is very cool. I have said before, because I was a programmer before we started writing full time, that I wish that like books gave errors like programs do when they're wrong. But this makes up for that small thing, you know. Sometimes I wish it would just tell me how it's broken. But I do love the freedom.
that's what editors are for.
Yes, editors can tell you how it's broken.
Editors are extra useful for us too, because it's like, you know, you're talking about it being like a collaborative process, and they can sort of like, you know, tell you, drill down to what you already know is like wrong. That happens with like me and Bree, but it can also help us communicate, because it's like, if I have an idea or I want to do one thing and Bree's like, I don't like it, I can't tell you why I don't like it, but I don't like it. Sometimes, you know, we can run it by an editor and the editor will be like, oh, well, here's why you don't like it, and just explain why it sucks. And then it's like, oh, okay, you know, like, because sometimes we don't have the language to express that, you know, because it's instinctive, you know, it's just a gut feeling. So when somebody can, you know, kind of come in and almost be like a mediator and be like, these are the words that you're looking for that, you know, you don't have. So Donna, forget it. You know, like, it's very helpful. It's very useful. But that happens because, you know, it's not a computer program that's going to spit out an error. It takes someone with years and years and years possibly of experience to look at it and be like, okay, here's what it is.
I've got one more question talking about series length. Do you have like a number of books in mind for your series, or is this more like an open-ended series where you just go with the world and wherever it takes you?
So for this one, we contracted with Tor for a trilogy, and we're going to stop with the trilogy for right now. We did sort of leave it with a very big open spin-off.
Yes, I saw that.
So there's definitely more stories we want to tell about some of this was our main Atlanta arc. And I think that like for now, and I talked about this on Twitter a little today. This was like, it is a deep and dark and stressful series to write, especially with everything going on in the United States. Sometimes it's like, do I really want to spend today doing research on how all these companies in my country want to destroy us? So we talked with Tor about it, and they were willing to do more books, but we thought we need a break. And so aforementioned other project is maybe going to be our next thing that we do.
One.
We'd like to do a world where like nobody can tell us that we're prescient or we predicted any evil events that happen in the news.
I would like the things that people think I made up to be things that I actually made up for a little while. Yeah, like last week I kept getting tagged because we had more solar flares, and then people kept tagging me because like archivists were helping raid the president's house, and I was like, okay, I love the promo for solar flares and warrior librarians, but I don't want to be relevant. Yeah,
like in this way. I would like to write some angry, horny fantasy people for a little while.
Yeah. Is the next thing you're working on? Is it the bears? Is that the next thing?
So that's actually got to do relatively soon. So I mostly I tell people I'm a hobbit in my hobbit hole at the moment. So this is about as out as I go via the screen. But after that, I'm going to be working on my next thriller. So I write New Zealand set thrillers. So I've written 2, and they're all standalones. And it's really good actually, because I write 2 long-running series. So I have them in my head. You know, I maintain that continuity in my head, and I love it. But Yeah, third series, no. That just
Do you
that's
like
just
writing
crazy.
standalone? So like there's no crossover characters at all? I've only
No,
read the
there's no
first one,
crossover.
so
Yeah, there's no crossover characters at all. Like I think a lot of people expect from me that there will be some kind of crossover, but I actually really like, and I think particularly for thrillers, it works, the kind of thrillers I write, it works just to have the standalone, because I kind of write very sort of tightly claustrophobic type thrillers with a small cast and a probably remote location, or, you know,
Love it.
and it's just nice to build that world for that book.
Mhm.
And it is this own thing, and and because it's not a series, you know, it gives me that time to play with different
Mhm.
kinds of worlds, and
Right.
it's just completely different headspace than writing
Mm.
like a side changing or a guild hunter book, or even one of my contemporaries. It's the thriller headspace is, because they're not, the first one had a slight thread of romance, the second one has no romance, so it's full on suspense, mystery, thriller. And so it's just a complete switch in the brain, and I think it's good for me. It's good for just learning new things, I think, as a writer. So this year, so what year are we? 22. This year is the 20th anniversary of the day I sold my first book. So this is pre-ebooks, right? I got the phone call, so it's in
yes.
September.
These were your Harlequins?
Yeah, this was my first book ever. So I think 20 years in the industry, you know, you can't be static, have to
Yeah.
grow, have to
Yeah.
challenge myself, have to keep on trying things that, you know, take my interest. And so it's fun. Yeah, so I'll be working on the thriller next, and probably tutoring with other things, you know, in the background. I like playing with things without telling anyone in public that I'm doing it, because there's no pressure that way. If it doesn't work, that's fine. No one's disappointed. If it does work, then hey, bonus book or novella, whatever comes out. And a lot of the time, that's how I call them my play projects. So I just play with them, and so I'm sure there'll be some play projects. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the thriller as well, because just because I have this creepy setup, so excited.
It's a little break. Yeah, those are nice. Those are nice.
It's just nice to have like my two series are very different as well, so that's good. And it's also having this third thing in there. So I always tend to do about 3 books a year at the moment. So it's nice just to have differences, and I get refreshed with each time. I don't know if you guys feel the same. Like it's refreshing to like you love this world, and then it's like, okay, now I get to come back to this world after 6 months away, or whatever the gap is, and it's really fun. I'm excited. You know, I'm so excited to be with the bears right now, because before this I was working on Archangel's Resurrection, which was all like zombies and archangels, and it was very sort of so it's very different from bears and beer. So
we've actually like another reason I think that we decided to stop at 3 is we have mostly, like, for novels, been writing in this apocalyptic world for the past 10 years, and it's been pretty, because we wrote 9 Beyond novels, and then we wrote 3 in the spinoff, and then we wrote 3 of these. So we've written like 15 books in a row, pretty much, with only little breaks in there of anything else. And so it's definitely, we've done side projects. Like we write for a one of the narrative game companies. We write for Choices. So we got to write some little video games, and that was fun. But like, it's definitely, I think that you're right. Sometimes you need to go away from something and do just something completely different, so that your brain sort of resets and gets excited about it again, instead of, you know, just sort of being in the exact same world. Like I can't imagine being someone who just writes books in one world forever. That would definitely
I think it really depends on the writer and what works for them. Like I know for me, it works better if I sort of write a book in a world and then leave it for 3 months at least, or 6 months, because I feel like things kind of what's the word, like a stew in there, and they're just kind of bubbling away. Things are quietly bubbling away, and then by the time I get back to write it, I'm like, oh my god, I'm so hyped. So hyped. I need to share this, all the stuff that's come up. Whereas I think if I was going straight from one to the other to the next, I wouldn't have that period of time where my brain has got time to just think on things. Like I'm not consciously thinking it. It's just it's going on in the back.
It's that subconscious like rock tumble.
Yeah, it's like going and like I might make a little scribbled note somewhere, and then so it's not like it's a breath that allows you to see the world more with fresher eyes, you know. And it's always, I'm just always so excited when I come back to anything. So hopefully 20 years later it'll be again the same. God, 20 years.
That is we've been doing this 14, I think.
Wow.
And that feels like a lot. I mean, just think of all the things we've seen change like over the past 10 years, because we obviously came in via ebooks. So like with digital publishers. And I mean, even in 2008, you know, there were people who were like, well, we're not going to bother to put our ebooks on Amazon. Nobody buys those books on there, you know.
Yeah, nobody.
So you probably, did you have an ebook release of the first Side Changeling? You probably didn't.
No, they were done later. We actually had to rewrite the contracts because the contracts were not, you know, they wouldn't have ebook language in there because it wasn't a thing, you know. I can't remember if they had some, like, if they become a possibility, then we'll, you know, renegotiate. Might have, but I know for sure, definitely it just wasn't, when I started, the only way to get published was like a print, you know, like a print publisher through the normal process. And it was even harder for me because I'm from New Zealand and I was submitting to publishers in the US or London or Canada. Like those are where the major sort of romance publishers were.
Was this like send books in a envelope submission?
Yeah. Self-addressed stamped envelopes.
Oh man.
Self-addressed. They had those things you could buy. So they would like, so because I was an international, I couldn't even stamp them. I had to get this special thing that they could exchange for a stamp at the post office to send stuff, like send a reply.
The international, the reply coupons. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like a whole different thing. And like, I was a student when I started, so like I had no money and I'm sending manuscripts overseas. So all my money was going into postage. You know, you guys don't know how good you have it with the electronic communication here.
Yeah.
So we have never had to like get a book in the mail or send one in the mail because we are just enough behind you. You know, Tor did offer to send us our page proofs as print. And we were like, no. I mean, I understand some authors are probably used to that, but no, thank you.
And I mean, I was going to say, can you imagine getting your copy edits in the mail?
Oh my God.
I've had, you know, I am from the time when I had copy edits in the mail. And so, and also because I was in New Zealand, I had less time than most authors would have because I had to build in the time for it to get back to New York. And so like these prints, and we were doing with pencil. You know,
did they ever like get lost? Like I'm just thinking about me trying to send mails.
No, but a few times because it was so tight, I actually just, my editor's assistant rang me up and we just basically had a phone thing where I told her all the edits one by one and she input them on her end. She was so good. So, and yeah, so it's crazy. I've seen so much change. And because I came in, like you said, just a little before you. So I caught the tail end of like what was and the beginning of what is. And so that's been really interesting to see the massive shift in how things were done and how things are done now. And it's just,
oh wow!
I find it all very fascinating. I forgot about all that stuff until I'm just talking to you. I'm like, yeah, that's so different. Like, no,
yes, it is. I feel like for me, I always think that like 2010 through 2012 were like that real pivot moment because that's when like I remember in 2011 everybody gave their family Kindles for Christmas. Because like January 2012, we like all of a sudden all of our sales exploded because it's like everybody was buying books and I was like, wow, okay, we're not going back. This is a change.
And the interesting thing is, because you guys were in the US and I went in New Zealand, and some part of it I was in Japan working. So the US was actually at the cutting edge of like the ebook revolution kind of thing, when it really took off. So we heard about these Kindle things, but they didn't actually make it to us for a while. So it was like this lag that we had. So that was also a different experience, kind of getting to watch, kind of getting to be a spectator to see how these things were developing, and then finally they turn up. And so we already knew a lot more than new users would have in the US, because they were getting the straight off the
I will
line
tell
kind of
you,
thing.
the Kindle one wasn't great. It was that big one that had like the weird keyboard and the scroll by. It was not. I had one. I had a Kindle one.
It was definitely a first generation model.
It was a clunker.
I don't even know if those ever made it here. I think by the time we got it, they were like much sleeker and like but
Yeah, that thing was the size of my car.
Wow, history, eh? We lived history.
We really
Book
did,
history.
and it has been such a pivotal time. And like it's like what you were saying at the start, like there are times when just everything changes, like decades where I mean, that's the decade where we got iPads. We have one series where you can sort of track the technology, because
everybody has flip phones and netbooks, and then all of a sudden it's smartphones and iPads.
Book 4 came out, and with my hacker heroine, and so she's got a netbook, and I was like, yes, I'm putting this adorable netbook in here. Netbooks lasted like 7 months. They were so cute, but then the iPads came out, and iPads like destroyed netbooks. But I loved those tiny little computers.
There was a series I was reading, and I cannot remember the author's name at the moment, but it was really, really good. But they were written quite far apart, I think, because in the first book she had a pager, and she needed to go to a phone box to call back if people paged her. And then by the last book, she had to change it, so she had a cell phone, because I think they must have been spread out over 10 years that they were written. And I really noticed that, just because I noticed that she had a pager, because I read them when I think all 3 were out. And so that was really interesting. So that actually was a change, like you said, that's visible on the page, because it's like, oh, everyone's thinking, why isn't she just using her cell phone now? So.
My kids barely know what a payphone is. Like, they will never know the extreme lack of joy from walking up to a payphone, trying to pick up the giant yellow pages and having that cover hanging there be completely empty because someone ripped it out. They'll never know the dubious honor.
Yes, I see someone in the chat said so many plots ruined by cell phones and voicemail.
It's true. Like mysteries. You have to be so careful writing mysteries now. So like my thrillers that I write, DNA, it's Game Changer, all that kind of stuff.
Everybody's recording everything on their smartphones and sending the evidence.
It's like they're not a thing over here as much, but I know in America there's a lot of Ring cameras, and I quite often hear about cases where people have been caught because the police got them on a Ring camera because they're everywhere in neighborhoods. And it's just these little pieces of technology that they do alter, because it's how our readers read, right? No reader, if your person in a contemporary has no cell phone, you have to have a reason.
Yeah.
Is it broken? Has it gone flat? Did they leave it at home? It has to be mentioned. Otherwise, it's breaking the reader out of the spell of the story, because the whole time they're thinking, but why aren't they just using their cell phone?
Yeah. You're locked in the trunk of a car. Easy peasy. Call 911. What are you doing? Get your phone out of your pocket. Like there are smartphones now. It's like you don't actually even have to like dial emergency services.
Yeah.
Like you just, if you could like poke your nose at your cell phone, you could make an emergency call. So it's like,
I almost did that accidentally one day, because the phone I had, I was just turning up the volume or turning it down, I don't know, and it set, the auto set is that if you push it a certain number of times in a row, it calls emergency services.
Yep.
And it makes this shrieking beep, and I was like, what? And I was like, oh, what to call.
Not having an emergency. It's just too quiet.
Yeah, but I was gonna say, in a way, when you make a dystopian world, you can actually play with those kind of things. Like, does everyone have a cell phone? Do you blow out the grid so that there is no cell network anymore? And then, so you can have a futuristic book, like you said, but you have things going backwards at the same time, which is really, really interesting to do as well.
Yeah, we ditched, nobody had cell phones in the Beyond series. We threw those right out. We actually wrote like the big, our sort of, I mean, they're humans, but our alpha character, he was sort of like tech-phobe because he was born the year of the flares, and so he grew up in the like worst darkness afterwards. So he was not going to trust technology for anything, and that gave us a chance to like sort of build this world around him where he was not going to rely on any sort of technology. He was, I mean, basically tech-phobic, and so we got to like really cheat a little bit there.
You know what?
Throw it all out.
I did the same thing with Danny, but for a different reason. Like the heroine
Danny
of
does
this
love
book,
her paper.
She keeps paper files of things. It's not because she doesn't trust technology. She doesn't trust the people who control the technology. Like she knows very well how many things are not in any records that Maya or Connell are ever going to be able to search because they have just been expunged. Like they have been erased from the record, but they can't come in her apartment and erase a piece of paper. So,
that's, it's, I have that in the Psy Changing series, just for the changelings really like hard copy because they know the Psy are really good at, the erasing technological stuff. And so, it's fun to do stuff like that. That is, it's built on the world. Like you said, Danny's aversion to technology is built on her knowledge of what is possible. And so is the changeling aversion to it, or not so much they use it, but it's like they use it with backups in paper, in hard copy.
Yeah.
I do want to say something. I was going to say this earlier. One thing I love about them is how much they use it ecologically. Because like, one of the precipitating events in our backstory is basically the climate wars. Like, we had the energy wars is what we call them because, we've got some situations here in our current timeline. And I love, like, I sort of fantasize a lot. I love the changeling, like the indoor happy mood lighting and like, all of the things that they have done to make technology. I mean, it's such a trope that technology is inherently destructive of the world. And so I really like that they have like this married technology to preserving and protecting the world. And that is something that's like really cool to me, imagining futures. Do you like do research about that? Like what people are doing?
Yeah, as any technology I mentioned, I do research. Is it possible? Could it be possible if certain other things were in? But in terms of the world building itself, I go from the logic. Like if there was a world where changelings existed, are they going to allow us to erase forests? No, of course not, because they are going to be a massive power in the world. Like if animals could vote right now, like there would be a massive voting block and they would stop all kinds of terrible things that are happening. And so it logically makes sense that in a world where changelings exist and they like wild places and they live in these wild places, that the entire technological ecosystem, particularly in terms of resources and stuff, is going to be heavily influenced by them because it's in their best interest to produce things that will make, that's not going to impact or like that's not going to hurt the world, the natural world that is so important to them. And if they make it good enough, then everyone else is going to use it too, right? Like they make it efficient enough and economically viable enough. Why not? Everyone wants. Psy love money, so if you make it that that's going to save them money, they'll use it. And so in the same way, like in my Guild Hunter world, it makes sense that the balconies of homes where angels live have no railings. They don't need railings. They just like to walk off and fly off, right? So it's like I build on the logic of the people who live in the world, and I think everything flows from that. Like for me, it feels very natural to come up with these, like, a changeling's not going to waste water because water is a very precious natural resource. And so you get into the recycling stuff that's like built into the world. And yeah, and it's actually just really cool to think how would this happen, and not just take it for granted that this is how it has to be because that's how our world is, because our world is not their world. Yeah.
There are a lot of people who I don't know. It's like it's too much energy or something to put into, you know, the re-envisioning. But, you know, I mean, like, that's the thing. When you start to build a world, you're building the world. You have to go back and you have to examine the way that things are. You know,
Yes.
you can't just be like, okay, well, you know, they're going to have this because we have this. It's like, okay, but is that necessarily true? And
I think that there's a habit, like and I think this because I've been discussing on a lot of, like, I've been hanging out because of my Wheel of Time obsession. I've been hanging out on a lot of sci-fi fantasy discords, and I actually got in a Twitter fight with someone a couple weeks ago
of course
who
you did.
who was saying that story is not important, world building comes first, and story and characters are, you know, just incidental to building a beautiful world.
How do you
And I
build
was
a
thinking-
world without thinking
Yeah,
about what
like,
the characters need, though?
You can't build the world first because the characters are the one building that world.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you don't understand what sort of world they would build, like, I think sometimes that if you think that you have to get the world done first and you want to, if the world is going to shape who lives in it, it misses the fact that, like you said, if animals could vote, we would have a very different world right now, you know? They're the ones that shape the world. So,
and I think one of the problems is if you really specifically only build the world first without knowing, like, you might do a little bit of the world building first as you're sketching out your story, that's fine. But I think if you build the whole world first without knowing anything about your characters, you also get into a situation you're forcing your characters to do things to fit the world, and as opposed to it flowing naturally. And I think that that's difficult. That makes a book feel forced, like the story, the plot line. It feels like you can feel the puppet master, you know,
yeah.
as opposed to it just being like you're in the world, you're in the story. It all feels very natural, and you know, and you're just along for the ride. And for me as a reader, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for books where it's like, I believe, and I am here, and it all makes total sense, and I'm just obsessed. And that's what I want. You know, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I don't want to be sitting around going, why would this person do this strange thing? I understand it serves the plot, but does that, because, you know, I mean, when you've got a really strong character, the readers can imagine what they're going to do next, even if you're surprising them, like, because it makes sense with them. If you present them with a challenge, the readers can imagine how they might respond to it because you've built this vivid person. I mean, I like to read books where I feel like I'm making a bunch of imaginary friends. And I like to read long series because I get to go visit my imaginary friends.
And I was going to say, I think one thing that's very similar in our books is that we like families, like found families and families that are related by blood. And I really like books. It took me a long time to figure this out, by the way, that I actually really like reading books with that, as well as writing books with that, because I love those interconnections. I love seeing people from not just one perspective, but from multiple perspectives. So, like, for example, I have Hawk. He's a snow dancer, wolf alpha in my books, right? And he is a different person to his pack mates who know him. Then he appears to a stranger. So, like, there is a scene in a book where someone who doesn't know him sees him and he's like, wow, I can't believe his mate goes to bed with him. This man is like lethal, you know, like, I can't believe she trusts him, you know, and it's just this perspective shift, like, and I love seeing that kind of stuff. And I love seeing all the different bonds people build with each other. And and I feel like from like, tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like from reading your books that this is how you two feel as well, that you really enjoy those bonds that are created between these multiple characters and different levels of bonds.
Yeah, the found families. I mean, I think that's what packs are. Like, I think that's one of the tropes that makes like a lot of us love reading paranormal romance, because you get the fantasy of this like family that isn't necessarily all people that are your blood, but they are your brothers and sisters, they are your friends, they have got your back no matter what. You know, you may fight with them, but like if an outsider comes for you, they are going to punch, eat, kill, shoot, and ask questions later.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that is and like, you know, like I think one of my favorite relationships in yours is Judd and Caleb, because this like slowly unfolding relationship between, you know, the assassin and the man who swears he's never going to have friends. Because, you know, it's and I'm going to tell you, like, our Discord, we have a motto, and it's we love 99 heroines and 1 Judd. Because we really love like we can't rank the heroines, we just love all of the heroines, and then we'll try to rank the heroes and nobody agrees, but Judd is the test. If somebody doesn't like Judd, we're like, I don't think you want to hang out with us. Because he's like, somehow we all love him the best somehow.
That's true. I was gonna say, I don't think that it's true that no one agrees on any of the heroes, because they pretty much agree on Judd. Yeah, 1 Judd.
1 Judd.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's fun, you know, and I really like writing those male friendships as well, because I think we don't see that as much in media, any kind of media. Yeah. Those really deep male friendships that there are different, you know, various friendships in the books, and I think in romance we see a lot of female friendships, which is, you know, because we have the female friend group and stuff like that, but it's rarer to see the sort of manly man friendships, and and yeah, it's good. It's you know, I like writing just all kinds of friendships as well, all the different types of friendships you can have. Like you can have a group that's really tight knit, or you have 2 people that are just like soulmates but in a non-romantic sense. And it's fun to be able to do that. And I think in a series there's more room for that, because if you're writing a single book, you have to really focus on the protagonist, whereas in a series you can have that slow building friendship like you talked about with Judd and Caleb, where you don't even know, are they actually friends at the start, or are they just working together? And now it's like, are they gonna actually end up at this dinner party that their mates are determined to have? So watch this space.
Yes, I think that's another thing that we both do. We really write ensembles, because like you have always had protagonists, like people who weren't the current hero or heroine, like had point of views from them. And that is something that we like to do too, when we've like occasionally gotten, you know, some pushback about it, but then I think people start to love it because it really lets you carry on these relationships, both build them up in advance. You know, like Sienna and Hawk, people were going to come to the publisher and shake them to get that book out of them, you know, by the time it came out. So you get to tease stuff in advance, and then you get to follow up. And I really love that too. Like, you know, I think a lot of people love, yes, I see in the comment, they're calling him so silent, PSY silent. Because that's the joke. He's so silent. He's so silent.
I was gonna say, when you can have those ensemble casts as well, you can do the backstory or the arc, the overarching arc of the series, or as like with you guys, the trilogy. You get to do a lot more depth into it, because you're seeing it. There are things happening in the world that cannot be only in one character's point of view. Like you need to know what, for example, my counselors were thinking when they were doing all their evil things. We needed to be inside those meetings, for example, and later on, you know, what Judd was doing in the background of multiple other books, you know, that had an impact. So I think when you write an ensemble cast in a series, it just gives you a lot more room to play with and reveal more of the overarching storyline as well, which is really interesting, because like with your characters, you know, you have characters with different specializations. You've got the medical side of things, you know, you've got someone who is in the ghost net, we've got some, so we're seeing different parts of the world as well, that if you just stuck with Rafe and Danny, you would only see the places they see. which and I think it just adds layers of depth to a world because you have more people that are seeing different parts of it.
Only the places they see. Actually, second half of the book, spoilers, I'm going to tell you guys, second half of the book is mostly each other's pants. So we really needed those alternate points of view.
Yeah, like near the end, we were like,
moving.
can we do another one already? And like, yeah, Danny and Rafe were probably in a closet somewhere. So let's just check in. It was that or a sex montage. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But then that kind of, I mean, there was a lot of sexual tension there. Like you made them wait a really long time.
We did.
I mean,
We really did.
they were flirting from the moment they met, and it was a lot. So, and that can be fun too. Like sometimes you ever feel like when you're starting like a new arc or something, you're throwing a bunch of darts or pushing off a bunch of things that you have to time all at different trajectories to like pay off in their books.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
And sometimes, honestly, sometimes I don't even think people are going to get a book. And then it's like, oh, this person that you named almost identically to this other person is now going to get a book. So, and they have to be on the page together.
Oops.
And
Yay!
oh, wow.
I'm assuming now that that's just going to be Axel because you know you love me.
It's like some characters are just like, yeah, it's my turn, my book, and I'm like, so
that definitely happens. I love it when they pop up and they're like, no, you can't ignore me. I am fabulous.
That's right. It's my turn, and I know you had a plan, but throw the plan away. And yeah, no, it's fun. I like it. I like that the characters come alive. I like that they have their own personalities and their own voices. And yeah, and actually that is when the writing is the easiest, when you know the characters. And for me, the way I write, like I said, I write my way into the characters. So it might take me an entire draft to get to know someone. And Zara in my books is a good example of this. She's very tight-lipped. So it took me like a whole
She
book.
would be Danny's best friend.
Yeah.
Gray's best friend.
Don't talk, okay?
Gray's
Don't
BFF.
talk. So
We
you have to
have
earn
an emoji for her on our server, by the way, that's just a bunch of hearts and a stabby knife.
Yeah.
we really love her.
yeah. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun getting to know all these people and just see where they take us, you know. And sometimes it's fun places, and other times a character you thought is going to be really critical, maybe it's like, actually no, this is not my time, and I'm just going to fade away for a while and do my own thing, and then they might come back. And yeah, so it feels like a living, breathing universe to me when I write series. And so there's always moving pieces. It's never static, and it's like which moving piece is going to come to the fore for this particular book.
Ooh, I have a question. Epigraphs, do you write them before the chapter or do you go back in at the end and write them?
I write them afterwards mostly.
Yeah, I was wondering because like sometimes like definitely feel like they apply to the chapter, but I mean I write them afterwards too, so you can go back and like make them apply. But like, you know, it is that is one of my favorite things of yours. Like I mean I know that they love the Wild Women articles.
No, actually I should say that so right now, for example, I've written about 20 epigraphs that I know need to be in the book, but they're not in the book. They're just in a file that says epigraphs. And so I'll go back and figure out the best places and the best way to fit them in. And sometimes I write them completely after I've written the book. But a lot of the time I'll get ideas for, okay, I think I know what kind of epigraph needs to be like roughly here. So I'll get ideas for it. Yeah, so it's a little bit of both, I guess, since I did remember that I did actually write this. I've written like so in some of, and you did this with your notes, your epigraphs with the communications as well, which is like you tell a story in the epigraphs. And so this particular set of epigraphs that I've written tells a story, and so they need to be in a particular order through the book so you get the whole story. And so when I'm doing something like that, I will write it beforehand, because then I know those will go in first before any other epigraphs, and then everything else is, because I know what needs to be in the epigraphs more once I've written the book sometimes. With the other things. Yeah, it's like what piece of information, it's a sneaky way to actually add more information for readers. And you guys do this exactly the same. And I find it interesting. I really love epigraphs, and not very many authors actually do them. And so yeah, I was
want
enjoying
more
yours as well.
romance epigraphs. More.
And you know what else is fun in romance? I don't do this in my Guild Hunter and Side Changing series, but I do it in my contemporaries, is chapter titles. They're so fun. Chapter titles.
You know, I have been thinking about that. Like, if we're gonna do a new
it for your
project,
fantasy.
maybe we should do chapter titles. Because
That
I mean
can be
that could be fun.
so fun. Yeah. Just
I may have to
put them
Donna's
in-
looking like
I'll turn it over in my I have to let it percolate.
percolate.
But I immediately had like a tarot inspired kind of vision there.
Yeah, I think it could be interesting. So
Mm.
I love things that like make the book itself feel like more immersive.
Yes.
Maybe like more, it's not just the chapters, it's like every part of the book is also storytelling. So
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that's why
Yeah.
I love epigraphs so much. It's you know, definitely
That all that kind of stuff I really enjoy, like things like having newspaper articles or emails or just anything, you know. In some books I've used letters because they're historical, so there would be letters. Like you said, it makes it immersive, and I feel like it adds another layer to the book, another layer of a story, so almost a story within a story. And it's just fun. And every so often I've read a book where it's like, oh, the story within a story has me so obsessed that I'm going to skip through and read all the parts of the story within the story first and then read the story. That's when you know it's a really good book.
That's how you definitely won. In the second book, I for some reason decided that the epigraphs had to tell, like they had to be two different arcs, one that started 20 years before the other, to tell these like different stories that both ended up at the same place. And I do not know why I did that to myself, because they all had to have dates and I had to make all the dates not mess up. And it was the hardest thing that I think I have ever done, but I was so happy at the end. So I'm always like really hoping that readers are going to read them.
Yeah, I'm not doing dated epigraphs in our next project. It's not happening.
The dated
They're gonna be
epigraphs are
undated.
definitely that was the next, that was another level. So you said you have a timeline, right? So you have all of that.
I need to. Yeah, because I began with a dated epigraphs.
Yeah.
It's like, and one time I didn't put a date in, and the copy editor's like, oh, I think you forgot a date here. And I was like, no, I was hoping I would just squeak by without working out the date, you know, but I put it in there because she made me. It's like I do think when you have a dated epigraph, it does make it a little bit more immersive, because if you do it right, like if you've done your background work, again, the reader, if a reader, you know, is rereading and wants to track the epigraphs across multiple books, they can, you know, and that things will line up. And for example, I have a list of every single Wild Woman reference. So there are certain magazines I'm going to reference more than once, because they have, you know, they have the special culinary issue, for example.
Yes.
And so like we'll come back to the special culinary issue. And it's just these little things that I think just add a little bit more to a book.
Love that you have like a library of these. This is the happiest. I think this is my favorite thing you've told me, that you like, I mean, clearly the end game of this is actually publishing them.
Right.
I think readers have made that request so many times, but like honestly it would take like about the same amount of time as writing a book. So it's like
probably not the best use of time, but still I love it. I love the culinary issue.
Yeah.
So
yeah, be wary of bears bearing food gifts.
Yes.
And, yeah, that's all I'll say.
Excited. I get to be wary of bears wearing food gifts, bearing food. That is
Bearing?
a tongue twister. Beware of bears bearing food gifts.
Bears bearing food gifts. Not wearing them, unless you know somebody made their mate
on how
angry.
the night goes, I guess.
Also
so
possible.
yeah, well, I think that we have been doing this for almost 2 hours, so
oh my god.
we're just having fun over here. Do you have any last things you want to say or ask, or you want to wave your book at us?
Oh yeah, I'll wave my book.
Beautiful Storm
It's
Echo. I
beautiful.
loved
You
it.
should buy it.
You should definitely buy it. If anyone in here hasn't bought it, I don't know what you're doing. I love this series. This is what there was 15 novels in the first, and this is the 5th or 6th.
6. I had to count just now. It's 6.
This is the 21st, and I have to say, like, 21 books in, and I still am having like so much fun. So
Oh yeah, that's what I want. That's
Good
what I
job.
want. Yeah. All I want to say, this has been really fun, and I'm so happy I got to celebrate your release day.
thank
with
you, and everyone should please
Do
buy.
you want me to hold
It is
it
an
up?
awesome book, you guys. It is an awesome book. It's a really great series. I love the mix of action, like the dystopia, and the romances. At the heart of this are romances and also friendships. So if you like all that
Yes.
stuff, you should definitely be reading this series. Yeah.
Thank you. That makes me so happy because I love it. Is the best feeling in the world when you like love someone's books and they love yours. It's just very it's the happy, it's author.
Yeah. It's
author
true, actually.
perfection.
Yeah. I still get a little thing when my people I've been a fan of for like a really, really long time have just suddenly told me that, oh, I love your books. And I was like, you still get that, little buzz.
Oh, I
and it's,
fangirled over like 2 different people who said something about the new release to me today. I texted Donna like, oh my god,
yeah.
I love to said something to me.
Yeah,
I think
we
it's
got
good to
flutters.
still have that joy, right?
Yes, I
Yeah.
hope I never lose that because it's
No.
wonderful.
It is. It's so joyous. So yeah,
It
this
is-
has been super fun.
One of the perks of the job.
So thank you so much, Marissa. Do we just end this? What do we do?
Marissa.
I can end it. Disembodied voice.
Thank you guys for coming. We'll see you later. Bye.